For 100 years, California had one answer to water problems: build a dam. Shasta Dam in 1945, Oroville in 1968, San Luis in 1967. Each one was supposed to secure water forever. But that playbook is broken now. Droughts last longer, floods hit harder, and the dams that once powered America's breadbasket can't keep up anymore. So California is trying something it's never done before. It's spending $6.8 billion to build a lake with no river. This is Sites Reservoir, a lake that won't block fish, won't flood towns, and won't even exist until someone turns on a pump. If it works, it could secure the lifeline of economy that feeds America. But it's taken 70 years to get here, and not everyone thinks it's worth it. So what changed? And why is California betting everything on an invisible lake? Here's something you need to understand first. California gets 65 trillion gallons of water every year from rain and snow, which is enough to cover the entire state in nearly 2 feet of water. So why are people running out? Because California doesn't have a water problem. It has a timing problem. Look at what happened in 2022. The state faced its worst drought on record. Lake Oroville dropped to 24% capacity. Farms left fields empty. Some towns literally ran out of water. Then, just 1 year later, atmospheric rivers slammed California with 32 trillion gallons of water in 3 months. Rivers overflowed, roads flooded. You'd think that solved the drought, right? It didn't. Because most of that water, which was enough to supply 200,000 homes for a year, rushed straight into the Pacific Ocean. Think of it like trying to fill a bathtub with the drain open. California gets plenty of water, it just can't hold on to it because its storage infrastructure was built for a different era and a different population. Let me show you the real problem. California's population nearly doubled since 1980. But the last major reservoir was built in 1979, 46 years ago. So while the population nearly doubled, water storage capacity didn't even just stay flat, it actually decreased because California has fewer operational reservoirs today than it did 20 years ago because some have been decommissioned or their capacity reduced due to sediment buildup and safety concerns. Meanwhile, California's farms use 80% of the state's water and produce 1/3 of America's vegetables and 2/3 of its fruits and nuts. That's not just California's problem. That's America's food supply. And it all depends on water the state increasingly can't store. Now let's look at what happened in those 2023 floods, because this is where Sites Reservoir would have made a real difference. When atmospheric rivers hit Northern California in January 2023, the Sacramento River, which drains about 27,000 square miles of Northern California and is the state's largest river, surged to flows over 100,000 cubic feet per second. Major reservoirs like Shasta and Oroville filled to capacity within just 10 days. Flood managers had 2 choices: release water to prevent catastrophic dam failures, or hold it and risk disaster. They released it. Over that winter, approximately 23 million acre-feet of water flowed out to the Pacific Ocean, which is about 7.5 trillion gallons. If Sites Reservoir had existed and been operational during that period, it could have captured over 700,000 acre-feet from those floods alone. Instead, it washed into the Pacific, completely unused. And you know what's even worse? Just 6 months later, California was back in drought conditions because temperatures spiked and what little snowpack remained melted unusually fast. Farmers were rationing water again. The cycle repeated, just like it has for decades. Sites Reservoir was first proposed 68 years ago in 1957. It was identified as one of the best locations in California for a major reservoir because of its natural valley geography and proximity to the Sacramento River. So, if sites was such an obvious solution, why did it take 70 years to build? In the 1950s, when sites was first identified, California was in the middle of the most ambitious water build-out in American history, Oroville Dam, the California Aqueduct. These were mega-projects that defined the state's water future. Sites got put on hold because the state had other priorities. Then, in the 1980s and 1990s, the political and environmental landscape changed, not in favor of building new dams. The economic recession of the early 1980s hit California hard. State revenues dropped, infrastructure budgets were cut. Water projects that weren't already under construction were shelved or defunded. At the same time, the environmental movement was gaining serious political power. And critically, people started seeing the real results of those massive dams built in the 1960s. Salmon populations, which had once been so abundant in California's rivers that Native American tribes built entire cultures around them, had collapsed. By the 1990s, many runs had declined by over 90%. Rivers that used to teem with fish, the Sacramento, the San Joaquin, the American, were now lifeless below concrete barriers. Environmental groups began filing lawsuits to block new dam construction. And they won. In 1986, the Federal Endangered Species Act was used to halt the Auburn Dam project on the American River, a dam that would have created an even larger reservoir than sites. That project, after $900 million spent, was never completed. Project after project faced similar fates. The Peripheral Canal was defeated by voters in 1982 after intense environmental opposition. The Temperance Flat Dam on the San Joaquin River was proposed multiple times and repeatedly blocked. Sites was caught in this shift. It was shelved, not officially cancelled, just postponed. By the 2000s, California's water crisis had become an annual emergency because of the 4 droughts in upcoming years like 2007 to 2009, and then from 2012 to 2016, which was the driest period in California's recorded history when reservoirs hit record lows.
So we're in a remarkable moment. We're experiencing drought conditions throughout the vast majority of state.
Sites was dusted off and reconsidered. In 2010, several water agencies formed the Sites Project Authority to fund and manage the project themselves. It marked a shift from waiting on the state to taking direct action. Still, even with local control, progress remains slow due to reviews, funding delays, and regulations. Environmental reviews took years because the regulatory requirements had become far more complex than in the 1960s. The California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, required detailed impact studies on everything from fish populations to greenhouse gas emissions. Politicians avoided taking clear stances because sites was controversial. Environmentalists opposed it, but farmers and water agencies demanded it. One water industry veteran said, "I've been in this industry for 25 years, and the last significant improvement to California's water system was over 30 years ago. We actually have fewer reservoirs now than we did 20 years ago, while the population has exploded. That's not about droughts or climate change, it's proof of decades of poor water management." And then there's the elephant in the room that makes every Californian skeptical of big infrastructure projects: the high-speed rail disaster. California's high-speed rail was supposed to cost $33 billion when voters approved it in 2008. It was supposed to be finished by 2020, connecting San Francisco to Los Angeles in under 3 hours. Today, in 2025, over $135 billion has been spent, which is more than 4 times the original estimate. Only 119 miles of track are under construction in the Central Valley, connecting 2 cities, Merced and Bakersfield. Not a single passenger has ridden it. The project has become a national symbol of government incompetence and cost overruns. So when California says Sites Reservoir will cost $6.8 billion and be completed by 2032, why should anyone believe it? Why wouldn't this become another high-speed rail? Promises made, money spent, nothing delivered. That's the question hanging over Sites, and it's a fair one given California's track record. But three things happened in the 2020s that put Sites back on track. First, in November 2014, California voters approved Proposition 1, a $7.5 billion water bond by a margin of 67% to 33%. This was important because it came during California's worst drought in recorded history. Voters were watching their reservoirs drop to record lows, and they voted to invest billions in water infrastructure. Sites secured $1.1 billion from that fund. Second, in September 2023, Governor Gavin Newsom signed Senate Bill 149 into law. Traditionally, projects could be delayed for years or even decades under the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA. While CEQA has protected the state from genuine environmental harm, it has also been used to stall or kill projects for reasons unrelated to environmental protection. SB 149 fast-tracked environmental reforms for major water projects like Sites and cut years off legal delays down to months. Third, by 2025, funding started flowing in real amounts. The state had committed its $1.094 billion from Proposition 1. The Federal Bureau of Reclamation, the agency that built Hoover Dam and most of the West's major water infrastructure, added $780 million. In August 2025, Governor Newsom added another $219 million from the state's general fund. Total secured as of October 2025 is $1.87 billion. That's more than a quarter of the total project cost. But here's the critical difference. If costs spiral out of control, these water agencies are on the hook too, not just taxpayers. They have every incentive to keep the project on budget because they're the ones paying for it. Now, about that $6.8 billion price tag and whether anyone should believe it. Just a few years ago, the estimate was $4 billion. By 2023, it had risen to $4.4 billion. Today, in October 2025, the official estimate is 70% higher. So what exactly is the scale of this $6.8 billion California building? It's a different kind of reservoir. Sites Reservoir will sit 80 miles northwest of Sacramento, near the small community of Maxwell in Colusa and Glenn counties. It's home to fewer than 100 people and consists of little more than a gas station and a few houses along Interstate 5. Right now, the site's location is just a sparse valley, rolling grasslands, a handful of ranches. It's labeled Sites on maps, but it's not even an official town. The name comes from early settlers, the Sites family, who homesteaded the area in the 1870s. But that empty valley is exactly what engineers wanted. It's a natural basin surrounded by hills, which means it can hold massive amounts of water without requiring an enormous dam. And critically, there's no major river running through it, which is what makes the off-stream reservoir concept possible. Let's dig into the numbers. The reservoir will stretch 13 miles from north to south and 4 miles east to west at its widest point. At its deepest point, the water will be 260 feet deep, which is about the height of a 26-story building. Surface area when full would be 14,000 acres, which is roughly 22 square miles. That makes the total storage capacity of 15 million acre-feet of water. Now, if you're not familiar with acre-feet, 1 acre-foot is the amount of water needed to cover 1 acre of land. So, 1.5 million acre-feet means sites can store enough water to supply 3 million households annually. Or, put another way, about 7.5 million people for a year, nearly 20% of California's population. When completed, Sites will be California's 8th largest reservoir. Nationally, it will be the 2nd largest off-stream reservoir in America, right behind San Luis Reservoir, which holds 2 million acre-feet. For comparison, here's how Site stacks up against California's existing giants. Oroville Dam, the state's 2nd largest reservoir, holds 3.5 million acre-feet. Shasta, the largest, holds 4.5 million acre-feet. Sites won't match those, but it doesn't need to because it's designed to do something different than those traditional dams. And that difference is why Sites is important. Traditional dams work in a way like you find a river flowing through a valley, block it with a massive concrete or earth-filled dam, and the river naturally fills the valley behind the dam, creating a reservoir. Every time it rains or snow melts upstream, water flows into the reservoir. Simple, effective. That's how Shasta, Oroville, and nearly every other California reservoir was built. But also destructive. Dams block rivers and stop salmon and steelhead trout from reaching their spawning grounds. These fish are born in freshwater, live in the ocean, and return to their birthplace to reproduce, but concrete dams block their path. That's why new dam projects have long faced opposition. Off-stream reservoirs work completely differently, and that's why some environmental voices support Sites. Instead of blocking a river, it borrows water from the Sacramento River during floods, when there's so much excess that it would flow into the ocean anyway. Water only gets diverted when 3 conditions are met. 1. All downstream water rights are satisfied. 2. Environmental flow requirements are met. 3. River flow exceeds both thresholds. That is, there's genuine surplus water. Water is pumped into the Sites Valley, enclosed by 2 main dams, Golden Gate and Sites, and several smaller saddle dams. When needed, water is released back downhill through turbines, which recovers about 80% of the energy used for pumping. What does this mean in practice? Sites captures water during wet winter and spring seasons, when atmospheric rivers bring heavy rain and melting snow floods the Sacramento River. During the 2023 floods, for example, the river was flowing at over 100,000 cubic feet per second. In those moments, Sites could have diverted some of that excess. But in summer droughts when flows drop to around 5,000 cubic feet per second, Sites wouldn't take a drop. The river needs every bit for existing demands. Once diverted, water travels through existing canals and new conveyance systems, large pipes and channels from the Sacramento River to the Sites Valley. So when does Sites release water? Not evenly across all years. Sites is designed to release the most water during the driest years, when California needs it most. During critically dry years, Sites will release 348,000 acre-feet. During regular dry years, 427,000 acre-feet. During below normal years, 224,000 acre-feet. During above normal years, 154,000 acre-feet. During wet years, only 87,000 acre-feet. Notice the pattern? During critically dry years, Sites delivers 4 times more water than during wet years. That's the entire design philosophy. Perform best when California needs it most. Long-term average across all year types is 232,000 acre-feet per year. That's the baseline Sites will add to California's water supply. Think of it this way. Traditional dams are like putting a bucket under a faucet that's always dripping. You catch whatever comes, whenever it comes. Sites Reservoir is like a giant tank you can fill when the faucet is gushing, when you'd otherwise lose water down the drain. Then use later when the faucet runs dry. It's not about capturing every drop. It's about capturing the right drops at the right time. Now comes the construction part. How do you build something this massive? Construction will happen in 3 overlapping phases. Phase 1 is creating the basin. This phase creates the physical structure that will hold 1.5 million acre-feet of water. 2 main earth-filled dams, Golden Gate Dam, 310 feet tall, roughly a 30-story building, and Sites Dam will seal off the valley. 7 smaller saddle dams will fill natural low points, and 3 dikes will provide extra containment. All structures use earth-fill construction including compact soil, clay and rock, which is chosen for cost efficiency, flexibility and resilience in earthquake-prone California. Then Phase 2 is about supporting the infrastructure. This includes spillways for overflow, outlet works for controlled releases, intake structures from the Sacramento River, a hydroelectric plant to recover energy, and fish screens to protect wildlife at diversion points. Then Phase 3 is about water conveyance. New pipelines will connect the reservoir to the Sacramento River, supported by upgraded pump stations at Red Bluff and Hamilton City. The system integrates with the State Water Project, feeding Sites water into California's broader network. As of October 2025, final contractor selection is underway using a Construction Manager at Risk (CMAR) approach. This model brings contractors into the design phase early, helping manage costs and avoid overruns by setting a guaranteed maximum price. Construction will start in late 2026 and will last about 6 years. The reservoir will begin filling around 2032, with operations expected by 2033. For scale, Sites will be completed faster than Hoover Dam, despite today's far stricter regulations. The project is expected to create over 5,000 jobs, primarily for local Sacramento Valley workers. By 2032, if all goes according to plan, California will have a brand new 1.5 million acre-foot reservoir that didn't exist a decade earlier. But of course, not everyone thinks this is a good idea. Let's talk about money. As we've mentioned earlier, the total cost is $6.8 billion. Out of this, $1.87 billion is already secured from state and federal sources, and we still need about $5 billion from participating water agencies. Now, some projections suggest water rates could rise up to 300% for state water project customers. That would affect 27 million Californians. That's a real concern. But there's a counter-argument as well. Annual economic benefits from sites are estimated at $260 million per year, while operating costs will only be $10 to $20 million annually. That's a 13-to-1 return on investment, excluding the construction costs. Still, people are skeptical. And they should be. One of the top comments on a YouTube video about sites said, $4 billion? If you compare it to the bullet train project, it's more like $400 billion. California's high-speed rail was supposed to cost $33 billion and be finished by 2020. Today, over $135 billion was spent, only 119 miles under construction, so why should anyone believe sites will be different? There are 3 reasons. First, direct beneficiaries are paying. 30 water agencies are signing binding contracts to purchase specific amounts of water storage. They get dedicated storage space proportional to their investment. If costs balloon, they're financially exposed. Second, proven technology. This isn't experimental. Off-stream reservoirs are working. San Luis Reservoir has operated successfully since 1967 using the exact same concept. Sites is essentially a larger version of a proven design. High-speed rail, by contrast, required building entirely new infrastructure types California had never attempted. Electrified tracks, specialized rail beds, tunnels through seismically active mountains. Third, political streamlining worked this time.
The final environmental impact report for the Sites Reservoir is now certified.
The CEQA environmental lawsuit was resolved in 256 days, which is an unprecedented speed for California. SB 149 imposed a 270-day limit on court decisions for streamlined projects, and the courts respected it. Does that guarantee Sites stays on budget? No. But it clears the biggest hurdle that kills California projects: endless litigation. But here's where things get complicated. Environmental groups are divided on sites. For decades, organizations like Friends of the River, the Center for Biological Diversity, Save California Salmon, and the Natural Resources Defense Council, NRDC, have fought fiercely against the project. They had many arguments, like: first, they argue that diverting water during high flows still harms river ecosystems. Even short-term reductions in flow can disrupt salmon migration and spawning cycles that depend on precise timing and water temperatures. Second, critics question the scale of benefit versus cost. Sites would expand California's total water storage capacity by only about 3.5% at a cost of $6.8 billion. To them, that's an expensive trade-off for limited long-term gain. Then there's the climate impact. The reservoir is projected to emit roughly 362,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent per year, about the same as 80,000 cars. Most of that comes from methane released as submerged organic matter decomposes underwater, a problem common in large reservoirs. Environmentalists also point to habitat loss, as the project will flood around 14,000 acres of grassland and oak woodland. They note that the Sacramento River is already over-allocated, meaning that in extreme drought years, the very times when sites would be most needed, there may not be enough excess water to fill it. Finally, tribal leaders have voiced strong opposition and cited the project's impact on sacred lands and cultural heritage sites. As Peter Dreckmeyer of the Tuolumne River Trust put it, sites is an expensive, uneconomic, unsustainable mega-boondoggle. Yet not all environmental voices share that view. A growing coalition of moderate environmentalists, water agencies, agricultural groups, and bipartisan officials argue that sites has a smarter, more balanced model for water storage. They mean that sites doesn't block the Sacramento River or obstruct fish migration the way traditional dams do. The river remains free-flowing year-round. Moreover, 40% of the reservoir's capacity is legally reserved for environmental purposes, including fish flows, wetlands, wildlife refuges, and habitat restoration for Chinook salmon and Delta smelt. Supporters say sites only captures extra water when the river has more than enough, after all legal and environmental needs are met. It's meant to store water during floods and release it during droughts. In December 2023, environmental groups sued to block sites under CEQA, the state's main environmental law. Thanks to Senate Bill 149, which speeds up legal reviews, the case moved quickly. By September 2024, just 256 days later, the California Court of Appeal rejected the challenge, a record-fast decision that allowed sites to move forward. What makes sites unique is that the environment will be its largest water user, not farms or cities. Almost half the stored water is reserved for fish and wildlife. Some water agencies are even funding sites specifically for salmon and habitat restoration, not drinking water. Still, pumping large volumes of water from the Sacramento River will have effects, even in wet years. The real question is whether the environmental and economic benefits outweigh those impacts. Let's talk about what's at stake here. Every year, they generate about $60 billion at the farm level. But once you include processing, distribution, and exports, that number jumps to over $400 billion. California is the #1 agricultural state in the US by value. It produces 13% of the entire nation's agricultural output. Think about this. 1/3 of all the vegetables Americans eat come from California. 2/3 of the fruits and nuts, over 400 different crops, everything from almonds and grapes to lettuce, strawberries, and dairy. And every year, California exports about $22 to $24 billion worth of food to more than 100 countries. So this isn't just California's economy, it's the whole of America's food supply chain. and this supply chain uses about 80% of California's water. But what happens when there isn't enough water? Over the past 5 years alone, California has lost more than 7,000 farms and 1.5 million acres of productive farmland, mostly because of water shortages. And when the supply is low, you know what happens? Lettuce prices go up, almond supplies tighten, dairy production drops. The ripple effects go national. And that's exactly what happened during the 2022-2023 drought. Parts of the Central Valley went dry. Farmers overpumped groundwater to survive, causing the land to sink. Some farms went bankrupt, and eventually, food prices climbed. And even now, in 2025, farmers are still facing rising costs of fertilizers, equipment, fuel, all while struggling with labor shortages. But the biggest threat still isn't costs or labor. It's water. That's where Sites Reservoir comes in. It's not a silver bullet, but it provides something the agricultural sector hasn't had in years: reliability. During the driest years, sites can deliver 348,000 acre-feet of water, which is enough to irrigate about 116,000 acres of high-value crops like almonds, grapes, and strawberries. That stability matters for the supply chain. When farmers know their water supply, banks are more willing to finance orchards and vineyards. Processors invest in new facilities, and rural economies stay afloat. According to economic projections, sites could generate around $260 million in annual benefits, with only $10 to $20 million in operating costs each year. That's a strong return. But the real value isn't in the numbers, it's in the predictability it brings. Because, here's the truth, every dollar of California's $400 billion agricultural economy depends on water. And when water becomes uncertain, so does America's food supply. So after everything we've just talked about, the stakes, the droughts, the losses, the big question is, what does California actually get when Sites Reservoir comes online in 2032? Let's break it down. The number one thing is water supply reliability. When operational, sites will increase Northern California's storage capacity by 15%. This means an average of 232,000 acre-feet of new water every year, and in critically dry years, that number jumps to 348,000 acre-feet. To put that in perspective, that's enough to supply over 24 million people or 500,000 acres of farmland. For a state that swings from floods to droughts, that reliability is huge. But Sites isn't just about people or farms, it's also built with the environment in mind. 40% of its total capacity, around 600,000 acre-feet, is legally set aside for environmental use. That water helps maintain the cold water pools in Shasta Lake, which is essential for salmon spawning. It supports seasonal flow releases that trigger fish migration and boosts food production for delta smelt in the Yolo bypass wetlands. Then there's flood control. During major storms, sites can capture massive surges, the kind brought by atmospheric rivers. If it had been online during the 2023 floods, it could have stored over 700,000 acre-feet of excess water that otherwise rushed downstream. The project also brings local benefits. Once filled, sites will open up new recreation areas in the northern Sacramento Valley, places for boating, hiking, camping. And beyond the construction boom, there'll be long-term operations jobs, supporting the local economy for decades. Finally, it strengthens the broader water system. By operating in coordination with Shasta, Oroville, and other existing reservoirs, Sites makes the whole network more flexible. This means better water management, faster drought response, and smarter use of every drop. So, yes, when Sites is finished, California gains more than just a new reservoir. It gains flexibility, stability, and a bit of breathing room in a water system stretched to its limits. But it is important to stay realistic. Sites isn't a cure-all. It won't end droughts or solve every environmental challenge. So, with all those benefits on the table, reliable water, environmental support, flood protection, it's fair to ask, how much difference will sites make? To understand that, we need to look at the bigger picture. California's entire water system was designed back in the 1960s for a population of about 20 million people. The number has doubled now, and we've already mentioned how California hasn't built a single major new reservoir in the last 30 years. Sites will hold a 1.5 million acre-feet of capacity, which is meaningful but not transformational. So, sites will do one incredible thing and won't solve one major problem. It won't solve California's water crisis on its own. Adding 1.5 million acre-feet to a system that manages more than 40 million every year isn't a silver bullet. But it can add flexibility to the state, which has been missing for decades. During critically dry years, sites can deliver 4 times what it delivers during wet years. That kind of flexibility helps California bridge the gap between flood and drought cycles. Because the truth is that the state has been trying to manage an increasingly volatile water cycle with infrastructure built for a stable, predictable one. In the past, California relied on a reliable Sierra Nevada snowpack, whose slow, steady melting kept rivers flowing through summer. But today, the pattern has changed. We're getting more rain and less snow, faster runoff and longer dry spells in between. Traditional reservoirs weren't built for that. They're designed to capture gradual snowmelt, not the short, intense surges from modern atmospheric rivers. And that's where sites stands apart. It was designed for this new reality, to capture fast, high-volume inflows when they happen and store that water for the long, dry months that follow. It's infrastructure built for the California of today, not the California engineers imagined in 1960. Of course, there's the timeline. Sites isn't expected to be complete until 2032, 7 years from now. That feels far away, especially for a state that's already waited decades to address this problem. As of now, the project has already cleared several major hurdles. The environmental impact report has been approved, federal and state wildlife agencies have been issued their key permits, and the main CEQA legal challenge was defeated in 2024. By mid-2025, the project had secured nearly $1.9 billion in state and federal funding, with land acquisition and contractor selection already underway. The next steps are equally important. The State Water Resources Control Board has finished public hearings on the water rights permit, and a final decision is expected soon. A construction manager at risk is set to be chosen by the end of 2025. Once that's done, construction can begin in 2026. Over the following 5 years, crews will raise the main dams, build the conveyance infrastructure, and prepare the basin for filling. If it all goes according to plan, sites will be structurally complete by the end of 2032, with reservoir filling to begin soon after. Actual water deliveries are expected by 2033. Of course, large projects rarely move forward without uncertainty. The remaining $5 billion in funding still needs to be secured from participating water agencies. The water rights permit could face tighter restrictions. New lawsuits could emerge even though the main environmental challenge has already been resolved. Construction costs could climb higher than projected, or political priorities could shift. None of these risks are guaranteed, but all are possible. That's the reality of modern infrastructure in California. Progress happens, but rarely without resistance. The difference this time is that sites has already survived the kind of legal and regulatory challenges that have stalled other projects for decades. It's closer to being built now than at any point in its 40-year history. Sites is a $6.8 billion bet that California can't manage today's water challenges with yesterday's infrastructure. It won't solve the state's water crisis alone. It adds 15% to Northern California's storage capacity. Still, it's the first major water storage project the state has moved forward on in more than 30 years. Sites is designed differently. It is an off-stream reservoir that captures water during floods and releases it during droughts. It works with the natural system. The real question now isn't about perfection, it's about execution. Can California build what it's promised on time, on budget, and before the next crisis hits? By 2032, we'll find out. What do you think about this breakdown? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to MegaBuilds for more deep dives into the world's biggest infrastructure projects.